This is the first 4 notes of the Overtones series on the saxophone. So we got B flat, low B flat, middle left, high B flat, and you get this number here, which is the frequency, and you get it by continuously adding 104 to the frequency. I want to go over some things that people do wrong when they are practicing their overtones in order to learn Altissimo. So first off the bat, I want to make a very clear distinction. When I say overtones, I'm talking about practicing your overtone series in order to learn your embouchure and airspeed set so that you can apply that to Altissimo. This video is all about how practicing your overtone series on saxophone is a terrible way to learn to play Altissimo. Now that's a bold statement because pretty much every book out there ever written is telling you that practicing your overtone series is a great idea. But let's talk about why it's terrible. And it's not even, normally I say in my opinion, but the simple facts are just out there. So I want to go over some of the reasons why it's just a terrible way to learn to play Altissimo. Learning to play overtones on your saxophone is really kind of a misnomer. Since every note is an overtone anyway, we should specify overtone series, this art of overblowing notes in order to get the higher notes to come out. So number one, on a saxophone, we have a magic high note button that does almost all the heavy lifting and all the work for us from day one. Now, if I was a flute player, and I am, brass player, which I'm not, they do not have that. They, from day one, have to learn to be able to do it with their embouchure and their airspeed from day one in order to get any note out. If it's set wrong, they're going to get the wrong notes. Now, we play saxophone for years using our automatic cheat button called an octave key. So we never develop the skills to be able to do that. Just ask anybody on the street to just jump in a manual transmission car and start driving it. Forget it. They're going to stall. It's going to take them a long time to figure it out if they don't have the proper instruction. And that's what I want to do for you. So we've never learned to use it. Just like in the Matrix, and Morpheus is like, hey, your eyes hurt because you've never used them before. Wow. Genius. Number two, nobody really learns Altissimo this way. It's in every book. Everybody who's ever run across that book always suggests that somebody pick up some overtones book to learn Altissimo. But they learned it the same way I learned it. And I learned it the same way some other guy learned it. You just got a fingering from somebody and you tried the one that worked, and then you just fooled around with your embouchure, and then you retroactively applied these overtone series practices to your Altissimo. But starting with that overtone series in order to get into Altissimo, forget it. And not all these notes are difficult to learn. So another thing, this is more specific to tenor. Number 3 is that the lowest Altissimo note is the hardest one to learn. That's Altissimo G, which is why I have 12 fingerings for how to play Altissimo G. And the simplest way to get started is to understand how your saxophone actually works. So that whole physics thing that I'm going to put in this video is going to give you an extraordinarily general idea of what's happening when you are playing the saxophone. So if you take a look at this graph here, you can see how all of these spikes represent all the overtones that are being produced when you play a low concert A or a low B natural on a tenor saxophone at 110 hertz. Let's take a look at how I can pick out the spike based on the fundamental or the lowest overtone of a low concert A. Here we go. Pretty cool stuff, huh? The idea is this. You want to build a house, right? A house is equivalent to notes or songs or something like this. And in order to do it, you need overtones or bricks. So we need to build these bricks for our house. One brick is half a wavelength. This is important because a saxophone builds notes in half wavelengths. The rule is we have to use all the cement, and no matter what the size of our brick is, if we have more bricks, they all have to be exactly the same size. So if our low B flat is one brick, the overtone above it is your middle B flat, and that's going to be 2 bricks. We have to use all the cement. We have to still use the same length of the saxophone. We have to still use our low B flat fingering, and those 2 bricks have to be exactly the same size. If we have 3 bricks, we still have the same fingering. We cannot change the length of the saxophone, and all of our bricks have to be exactly the same size. And the problem starts to occur once we start to move up the saxophone. So I showed you in that video, once you hit a low E flat, this instrument is a disaster for playing overtones. The saxophone is only a closed cone when we are playing low B flat. So it's this freakishly open hold cone thing that just plays overtones in a brutally disastrous way. But lucky for us, ladies and gentlemen, it starts to make sense once it gets to a certain point. So when we're playing our overtones from the bottom up, it starts to make sense again, kinda, a little bit, at F sharp. Now let's try to play our overtones off of that and see what happens. So we got low F sharp. If we do that same trick off of G, it's still a little funny. Let's do the same trick off of G sharp. But lucky for us, ladies and gentlemen, it starts to make sense once it gets to a certain point. When we play our palm D, instead of overblowing to the Altissimo A, it overblows to Altissimo A sharp or B flat. All the palm keys overblow this way. Alto, tenor, doesn't matter. They overblow this way, and we can take advantage of how badly our instrument is actually producing overtones. So I got this video that I've already done before, but check this clip out. Piece of cake, man. Practicing your overtones is beautiful. If you want to learn tone production, you want to increase the quality of your sound, it's fantastic. But if you approach it as though that mathematical formula applies to every note, you're going to hit a wall. Think about it like this, ladies and gentlemen. If our low B flat produces overtones in this very consistent way, and the saxophone as a whole is a closed cone, then you never need to ask anyone what any fingering for any note is. You just finger that note, play the overtone series, and that's a wrap. To sum it up, if it doesn't have that magic high note button, every single note is altissimo, because they are all played exactly the same way with this overtone manipulation. So if you think about it, how can I even get started with an instrument? I have to start with a preconceived knowledge of how to play altissimo, because I clearly don't know the overtone series or what to do with my mouth or anything like that if I've never even played the instrument before. So how does that person even get started? The same way we all get started. The same way we got started trying to play altissimo, we just guess. We take a wild guess at it, and then we retroactively fit our knowledge of how a saxophone produces overtones to our practice routine so that we can play altissimo. This is exactly what we should do if we're going to use our overtone series knowledge and apply that to altissimo, taking into account that the saxophone starts to produce these catastrophically wrong notes that we can incorporate into new fingerings. So that's all I got for you. Thanks for tuning in.